We are live. All right. Welcome to episode 5 of Lanky and the OddCrapple. Today, we are discussing creativity. I am the OddCrapple.
And I'm Lanky.
Yes,
Should
he's
say
very,
right
yeah,
there.
right there. um, this podcast is going to be kind of a lead up to us going to Dragon Con in a few days. Well, actually, I think 8 days because we're going
I'm
like
just gonna say a
20,
week.
27th or 28th, about a week, yeah. Um, so it's likely that we won't be able to do an episode while we're there, because the time frame will fall into, us, I think, just getting there on uh, Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah. I expect us to get to Georgia. Maybe like we'll have a late lunch in
Yeah.
Georgia, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, so
Um, so basically, we want to make sure that, we got this one up and, made this something for people to watch, uh, just so while we're actually at the convention that, we can get video footage and then maybe put up, a pre-recorded video, um, with all the footage that we get. But I want to, being that we are going to Dragon Con, I wanted to talk about creativity and, you know, all of the different types of creativity and what drives creativity, what can stunt it or, completely destroy it. Um, Lanky, I'm going to throw it to you only because you are, an animator and, graphic artist and all that. So I'm going to kind of feed off of your lead because you are technically the creative one, of the two of us. So I want to know, I'm kind of going to follow your lead on this one, and I'll just kind of, you know, respond to things that, you throw at me, sort of.
all right. Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I have a background in visual art, graphic design, animating. I have done a little bit of theater, voice acting, that sort of thing. Nothing too professional degree. It was just more of a hobby, more fun. Um, but I guess as of late, or at least relatively speaking, in my adult life, I discovered these subcultures of like cosplay and costuming, or like steampunk, or diesel punk, etc. And Dragon Con is just kind of this hub of where everything comes together. And you get this collection of artists and makers and prop makers, inventors, that sort of thing. And you you can see that in what people make as far as their costuming, their props. There is a lot of work, a lot of creativity put into these, the stuff that they are wearing, and I think it's inspirational. So I've kind of gone from, drawing, pen and paper, as an artist, to leatherworking or woodworking or hell, sewing, knitting, etc. Whatever costume you make, um, it takes a good amount of skill to put it all together, make sure it works, make sure it fits. Um, it's uh, it's quite the endeavor.
Yeah.
And so so my main argument is that I would say any creativity is part of art. Um, so I guess you could technically say it, it takes place in even like the engineering world, the realm of science. when creative minds come together to either find something you wouldn't normally see in the world, or new ideas, new architectural wonders, engineering wonders, scientific discoveries. It takes some out-of-box thinking to get to that point. So I would say there's a lot to the creative mind besides just the usual art, painting, sculpture, music, etc. I creativity is everywhere, and I kind of just wanted to shout out to all those who are considered makers, discoverers. Sometimes that aspect of what they do can be thrown under the carpet, so to speak, and kind of missed. Whereas in the art world, fashion, prop making, it's right in front of you. So,
yeah.
But yeah, the stuff they make, it's incredible.
Well, actually, before I ask you this question, because I know that you're going to go into an explanation to answer my question. We actually have an old friend in the chat. Matt just jumped in.
No way.
Yeah.
Hi, Matt.
Because I'm sitting here looking at the chat and I see Drone Junkie, and I'm looking close at the icon. I'm like, wait a second, that's an ugly ginger. I'm like, oh my god, it's Matt. But okay, wow. I knew I was gonna forget that question.
You mentioned it required some explanation.
Yeah, I should have given a little bit of it before I hate that. But okay, what was the last thing that you said before I responded to you?
Mainly I was just going on about how creativity itself is a form of art. That you can find it anywhere. It's, definitely in the art world, but also science, engineering, architecture. Yeah. So
Yeah.
a lot of places where you wouldn't think you'd see creativity, but just the synthesis of ideas. It's in more places than you think. So
Yeah. I'm sure that particular thought that I had will come back to me. But what for you? What drives creativity?
honestly, for my part, and again, I think it takes some imagination to be, creative. But I think part of it is the desire to see something you wouldn't see every day, like in
Mhm.
the normal world. Um, and I'm just thinking back to the older art forms of mosaics of the gods, or the artists drawing images of fairy tales and these myths and that sort of thing. And then nowadays you see movies with superheroes and things that take you out of the ordinary. um and again, I see that in cosplay, where you take on the role of either someone you've seen on screen or in pop culture, or you put yourself into another universe,
Mhm.
like with steampunk or diesel punk, cyberpunk, sci-fi of any genre. Or I guess that is a genre. Sci-fi of any uh, specific world,
Mhm.
Star Wars, Star Trek, etc.
Yeah.
It you want to. It's like a vacation for the imagination. Like, you're
Ooh, I like that. That sounds like it should be the new slogan for Disney.
I, I'm open to any job market. So,
That's awesome.
uh, but I mean, yeah, you kind of have to take yourself out of this world, put yourself into another world and just enjoy it. Appreciate that imaginative, that creative ride, and just go with it. Because we can't spend our days, working our hands, our fingers to the bone, that sort of thing. And again, this is probably calls back to a couple episodes before, but healthy escapism.
Yeah.
Um, when you need a break from the ordinary, and like if you don't see the world you want in front of you, then you try to make it, whether it's a movie or a cartoon or a costume. You become part of that world that you want to be in. And this is where the world of steampunk, Dragon Con, Comic Con, everything is so readily available to you. Like, this is your escape. You can go into this world, and everyone else is in their own world. And when they see your costume, your props, they're like, "Oh my god, that is so cool!" Like, nice job. And I mean, it's invigorating, um, because you can be whatever you want in any world you want, and
Hmm.
I think that is very liberating for an artist or creative type.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the maybe primary motive. I mean, don't take my word for it, but um, I know that's a very heavy motivation to be creative, is
Hmm.
to see something out of the ordinary, to put yourself into another world.
Hmm.
Um, and again, self-expression. That's
Yeah.
also a key aspect to it.
Yeah.
So,
One of the things you said actually brought up a question I have before we go into my next part of the question. Um, you talked about, escaping this world and, bringing yourself into another world. But what, especially in the sort of social climate that we're facing, um, how can we bring creativity into the real world so that we can actually improve the world around us? Because, I
uh,
mean, I know that, our generation said that, by this time we probably should have had flying cars. So as far as creativity and imagination go, what can we do as far as creativity and imagination to actually apply that to real world concepts? Because we have to I think we have to be creative to be able to improve things.
definitely. Sadly, again, living in the real world, uh, the bulk of the real world is driven by money.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I hate to say it, but you can see this in our architecture. Now everything is a gray concrete block, whereas 100 years ago, 150 years ago, you had lines and reliefs and statues, statuesque figures on buildings. And I would argue, the kind of like the Gothic style, the Victorian, neo-Victorian aesthetic. But now, I mean, in the 80s, everything was, brown brick. Now everything is, gray concrete. Um, and, McDonald's, Wendy's just looks like this box of concrete. And I'm like, oh, okay.
I'm surprised they haven't turned McDonald's buildings into literally looking like a Happy Meal. I mean, that's logically that just seems to me to be the next step is they're gonna just turn all of them into literally looking like a Happy Meal.
But yeah, but that's the strange thing. Like, the aesthetically pleasing stuff that you think would drive people to, oh my god, this is so cool, I want to get closer, I want to see what all this is about, where you think it would be a draw for people. um I guess ultimately it's not economical. And again, artists do need to be paid, as well as scientists, for what it's worth. And when we do live in a capitalist society, money is kind of the fuel
Mhm.
for any economy, any job, any task. That is at least the primary motivator, generally speaking. And again, you'll get these volunteers that will do murals, or an artist who donates a statue to the park or that sort of thing. But realistically speaking, artists need to eat. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to make their art.
Well,
And
and that actually brings up another point, and I keep wanting to transition into the next question, but you keep bringing up, good points.
sorry.
No, you're fine. But about a week ago, I sent you pictures of a piece of art that a friend of mine did.
Yep.
So, in your opinion, based on what you know of that situation, what is your take on somebody who is that damn talented and does get paid for her work, but what's your take on being commissioned to do something and showing it to somebody that you're doing it for, and them just completely hating it after you've put probably a week or more into it?
Yeah.
And then, actually, I don't even know if I told you the update. She ended up meeting up with the people who commissioned it to give them back their money. And because she handed them a check, they berated her in a public parking lot. They berated her aggressively.
Ooh.
And that actually leads me into my next question. So that was a good segue. In your opinion, um, what's your opinion of that? But on the broader spectrum, what is your opinion about in regard to things that uh, can destroy somebody's creativity? Not like physically destroy something they've created, but destroy their willingness or their drive to do so.
Yeah. Okay. So you got a couple questions there. Hold on.
I
I would.
wanted to get them all out there because I keep forgetting them.
Wow. Okay. So assuming money makes the capitalist world go around.
Mhm,
Actually, I'll just say it makes the world go around. Um, when you defund the arts, the sciences, that can. Uh, I mean, it inherently devalues the product of an artist, of a scientist, etc. So that can definitely uh, damage the psyche
mhm,
to some extent. Like if you're trying to do this as a form of like self-expression, this is the world I want everyone else to see in my head,
mhm,
that sort of thing, and then you're told publicly that it's not worth it. That can take a toll. And again, one incident doesn't make a trend, but that can be the start of something.
mhm.
One piranha bite doesn't hurt much, but then you get a slew of piranha, and then you're like, oh, well, it's been a good life. Um,
That's an
but
interesting way to put it, but okay.
but so yeah, so in the instance for your friend, that is just a bad situation. It seems like the people who did the commission probably weren't uh, avid respecters of art, because when you commission something, that is inherently a contract, which entails a promise.
Mhm,
So when an artist makes something for you, again, that's part of the contract. Um, and whatever you promised each other is what you are supposed to deliver. And again, a good artist doesn't make the same thing twice.
right.
Granted, there are things called prints, or I don't these numbered works of art that
Yeah, they have like serial numbers on them so that they can indicate, that they are, one of a kind, or, they have serial numbers to indicate if they're part of, a series.
yeah
Kind of like comic books.
exactly. So and again, once that number, once they hit that number, they don't make anymore, and then so that collection, that series becomes its own work of art, that its own
Mhm.
collectible.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same thing with an artist and their work. They make a piece, and that's it. Anything else they make that might be a copy is still never quite the same, especially if
Mhm.
it's done by hand or something like that. So it's unique in its own right, and it's worth I guess whatever anyone's willing to pay for it.
Mhm.
But with that commission, that's what they said they would pay for it. So both the artist and the commissioner owe it to each other to make that trade, as promised. And to go back on that, I would say it hurts the artist more because they sacrifice their time, energy, their creative mind to
Mhm.
that task, and they get nothing for it. Um, and that's and again, art is subjective, so
Yeah.
that also is counting against the artist because that value can change drastically.
Mhm.
So in my mind, I would say the commissioner owed the artist what they promised. They shouldn't have reneged on
Because
that
I mean,
contract.
realistically, like you saw the painting she did.
Yeah, it looked good.
I mean,
Lanky.
realistically, that's eh, I think realistically speaking, it's not going to be hard to resell. So
No,
in my opinion, what should have been done is they should have been more clear as to what they were expecting, or they should have taken the piece that she made and then maybe sold it because it wasn't something they wanted, and then use the money that from the sale to be more specific as to what they wanted her to do.
to recommission.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a possibility. And when you own something, it's then your prerogative to do whatever you want.
right.
But I do know, and again, I love steampunk, and I've gone to panels where they, describe when an artist does something, um, they've learned to take a down payment, like a non-refundable down payment.
And that's actually something I was going to ask about, because when you're doing something, especially to the degree that she does as far as her skill, she needs to take a down payment. Like
Mm,
she did two commissioned canvases for me,
very
and
cool.
I have them hanging up in my room, and I literally brag to everybody about them and tell them about her. But it's like, having grown up with my mom being an artist of sorts, even though she primarily does it as a hobby, um,
Still art.
I know what to look for as far as skill level and what art is going to be worth. Um, so I think that it should, especially in today's society where there are far too many people that seem to be out for themselves. Um, and I understand that you want what you want,
Mm,
but if you're asking somebody to produce that which you want, I think that you have the responsibility of being explicitly clear with them what you want, and be having the class, if they don't particularly do it up to the very minute specification, not to berate them, especially in public.
yeah, and that's just common decency.
Yeah.
You don't do that to anyone, whether it's an artist or anyone else who provided a service or did something for you.
Hmm.
You don't treat them like that, especially if they're handing you if they're handing you money.
Yeah.
That's whatever.
It, like it blows my mind. But then there's the other end of the spectrum, and you'll know who I'm talking about because I've talked about this before. The people that have the skill and like an astronomical level of capability, but for some reason they don't charge what they're worth, or they don't charge at all and they give freely as gifts. It's like that's not the way to that. And somebody said this to me in a business class I took in high school. If you don't put a monetary value on something that you create, people are not going to see it as valuable.
Hmm.
And if you give something away free that you've made, people are not going to see the value in it.
Uh, yeah. I think the takeaway there would be to know your worth.
Yeah.
Because for the longest time I was the same way. I I would either do things for free, or I mean my friends were my top clients, so
Hmm. Yeah.
I didn't charge a whole lot, especially in the economic downturn. Like nobody had money,
Right.
so especially artists. And so you kind of had to gauge, and step very gently, like, okay, I want to sell this piece. What would be, you know, how will I be able to pay rent, but also not lose them as a client? You
Right.
have to walk very carefully. And
But I also think that what you charge determines your clientele. Because if you have people that see the worth in your art and they're willing to pay a certain price, that determines your clientele.
yeah. But also you need that exposure first. So you need, uh, I don't know, like farmers market in the rich part of town to be like, hey, I have some paintings here, or whatever you make.
Well, I
Um,
mean, to go, I don't know if I don't know if we discussed it on this podcast or when we were doing discussions, but if you think back to when I asked you to come to the first uh, Footprints fundraiser in
yeah,
Crandall Park, I had asked you to do caricature drawings of people. And I asked you what you wanted to charge. And you, if I remember correctly, there wasn't even a figure in your head because you weren't, as far as I remember, you actually didn't have any intention of charging.
yeah, because it was a charity event, so I'm like, oh, I'll just do the characters for free. Um, but yeah, then I didn't have an answer for you until like 5 minutes after you asked me.
Yeah, well,
So
I mean, I think you and I came to a decision, you know, collectively as to what we were gonna have you charge for them. But it's just like it's one of those things where, you know, I I mean, I have a feeling you knew the value in your work, but like you said, you were of the mindset that it was a charity event, so you were just going to, give your time and your craft. But um, I I think knowing your worth and expressing, in especially in most circumstances, I've got to be able to compensate myself for what I'm doing because I could be doing other things, but this is something I want to do.
mm, and honestly, it's trial and error. You won't know your worth until probably several sellings or givings, whatever
Hmm.
whatever you do with your art.
Right.
And at some point, it does hit you that well, I need to go grocery shopping, so I
Yeah.
might need to charge a little more for a piece.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's weird because in this avid economic society, we're told that functionality is key. And where does art stand in that regard? Like,
Hmm.
you know, at at best, you make things look beautiful
Yeah.
and appealing, and I like that's part of the social construct. Like
Yeah.
when you want things to look nice, uh, you hire artists, or at least hire something to look different, or you know something that makes people feel something.
Yeah.
Uh, and you need artists for that. Like not every building can be gray concrete.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that you actually brought into my head was um, graffiti.
Hmm.
People look so negatively toward graffiti, and I understand that there is gang related graffiti, but even the gang related graffiti is gorgeous to look at.
It can
Be-
be.
because these kids that are doing graffiti, most often they're not the gangbangers. They're just a tagging crew is what they call themselves. Like they'll tag a building with their logo, and they specifically go around and do graffiti. um, but I think that honestly, I think that people need to stop cracking down on graffiti and just and start embracing these graffiti artists and saying, I own this building, I want to make the exterior or the interior look aesthetically pleasing. Can you help?
And that's funny. Like the sad thing is, graffiti gets such a bad name because graffiti is an umbrella term. Like
Yes, you're right.
graffiti is everything from me putting my initials on a building to a portrait or caricature or what have you of uh I don't know, someone I think who is important.
Hmm.
So you have graffiti and then there's graffiti art.
Hmm.
And yeah, graffiti art can look freaking amazing.
Yeah.
And it can actually add beauty to a city landscape, a town, wherever it's happening. It I think it could add appeal if it's done well.
Hmm.
Again, if it's just black spray paint with letters,
Yeah.
I'm like,
Are you
whatever.
familiar with the Step Up movies, the dance crew movies called Step Up and Step Up 2?
I I think I've heard of them.
Yeah,
I haven't seen them.
they're actually where Channing Tatum made his debut, essentially.
Oh, interesting.
Um, Reason I bring those up, I saw Step Up 2 before I saw the first one, and one of the main things that was a focus in there was that one of the main characters was part of a tagging crew. And what they did, they would go around and they would tag, or they would create graffiti art on certain surfaces, and they would record it and essentially put it up on YouTube. But it wasn't called YouTube in the movie, but because they had to use something different. But they put it up on a platform like YouTube, and people would kind of, you know, rate their stuff and all this kind of stuff. But you know, it got me thinking differently about graffiti, because before my mindset was, it's a bunch of hoodlums doing it. But then once I saw the Step Up movies, it's like, wait a second, these kids are not, you know, I mean, I guess they could be loosely considered defacing something, but they're not harming anybody. They're, defacing a building maybe, but it's not anything vulgar either. It's not
Hmm.
something that somebody wouldn't want to look at.
And there's a lot of graffiti that can be beautiful, or it can send a message.
Hmm.
That makes society think.
Hmm.
Like Banksy or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I'm not quick to discount it because I think, like I said, creativity is art itself.
Hmm.
And when you make something, whether you're spray painting at I don't know, like a angel or something, that and it looks appealing, like it's done well. Uh, again, I would say it adds value to a city
Yeah.
or town, whatever locale.
In
Uh,
in areas that you've been in, have you ever seen graffiti that has caught your eye?
yeah. I know for my part, I like gradients. So if it is a name, it's like bubble letters, and it's I don't know, it goes from like blue to yellow or something like that, and it's done really nicely.
Hmm.
I get spray paint can allow for that. It's yeah, it's it's nice. But uh, I, if it looks good, I don't see why it should be taken down
Hmm.
or um, I mean, unless it's I mean, you can always get the negative aspect of graffiti, like some very bigoted statements, or very offensive toward a group of people, say.
Yeah.
And I think that shouldn't have a place in a public square. But if it's for the sake of creativity, for the sake of art, then I don't see the problem with it.
Um, as far as like, I just started, like I told you before, I've just started watching the Black Lightning TV show about the DC superhero.
Ah,
Um, and in on one of the buildings, I noticed um, I don't know if it was a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. or I know it was a quote. I just don't know if it was from him, but it was spray painted on like a community building, and I think it had a picture of him spray painted on there. And it's
oh,
like, I think if it's done right, I think it adds to the aesthetic of the building because it kind of tells you, it kind of gives the personality and the character of the building. It tells you what what that building is all about and what happens in that building.
yeah,
And it's like I wish that there, because they say when you move into an apartment or when you're looking at apartments or houses, you're going to choose the house with the color scheme that most catches your eye and makes you feel kind of at home. So I think that if graffiti was, not looked as negatively upon, I think that if they allowed more graffiti, as long as it was, reasonable and tasteful, I think that it would beautify some of these really rundown areas.
yeah. And I guess I hate to say it, that kind of mm, F script. Never mind. Um, you just introduced a segue to a whole other conversation about city planning and funds and that sort of thing.
Well,
But
let's
yeah,
let's not get too off course.
that'll be our next episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, eh, creativity, self expression. I'd say people need that, or at least most people. I think. Um, and if they get that, if their palette is a wall,
Yeah.
then I'm like, if they do it well, keep it up. So
Um, when you and I meet up in a couple of days, um, I'll try to find pictures of when went to Disney World for the first time. Um, the wheelchair that I had at the time, um, it had this solid black panel that you put on the wheel so that your fingers didn't get caught in the spokes. It protected your fingers from getting caught in the spokes.
Oh,
One of the coolest things was my mom, being the artist that she is, would regularly take like the puff paint like that you find at art stores, and
yeah.
she would do different designs on these panels. And the whole, I think, 7 days that we were in Disney, like both panels on each wheel had Disney themes all around them. It was so cool. Like that, like things that you can change out and kind of do themed like that. Because I understand, like with the graffiti, that it's more permanent. But I think if something is more subjective, like it's you can change it based on different you know subjects or whatever you're doing or purposes. If you can repurpose something, um, and keep adding to the art, I think that would be good.
Jeez. Actually, you just made two good points.
Okay.
Because there's some art that isn't permanent, um, and like mandalas, like Buddhist monks,
Oh, okay.
they do sand art, and it's very geometric, more I guess circular, but it's to the overall message is that all is one. Let's celebrate unity and oneness and that sort of thing. But after they create these amazing sand mandalas, they destroy them. They stomp on them, brush them out, whatever, and then it's done. Like they got to start all over again.
Wow.
And again, it's Buddhism, and which it touts the impermanence of things.
Hmm.
So you have this beautiful work of art that is destroyed by their own hands, to express that life is fleeting, time is fleeting, everything changes, and nothing lasts forever, which is an interesting message. It makes one appreciate the present,
Yeah.
the nowness of things.
Um,
Um,
and I don't necessarily like to dive into this sort of subject just because it's a very hot topic that can elicit a lot of different responses. But in your own opinion, as far as the context of art goes, what religion would you say have you seen like the most intriguing art pieces come from?
okay, you got a couple things there. I would say the most art that I've seen probably comes from maybe
Oh no, no,
Christianity.
I said most intriguing.
I think, yeah, the operative word, because uh generally speaking, I don't usually find religious art intriguing, except I do love Greek, ancient Greek and Roman statuary, their architecture, because that usually tells a story, a history,
Hmm.
as well as incorporating the gods into everyday life. Like, um,
Well, we just lost monotheistic viewers, but that's okay.
um, but I would say, and again, I studied a lot of Greek and Roman
Hmm.
art, so that
Yeah.
I find that fascinating. That for thousands of years, this is what they did, and 2,000 years ago, they had the tools to make amazing, sculptures
Hmm.
of these figures they held with the utmost respect. Um, and I knew it was dangerous because I also learned that with the introduction of Christianity, they would lop off the heads of the statues because it was uh, oh god, what was it? With the one true God, whatever there's no such thing as Athena or Artemis or Aphrodite or Zeus or Hermes. So they lopped off all the heads, and which is why you see all these statues with no heads. Which is bad.
They always creeped me out. I never understood why they didn't have heads, but then I watched Doctor Who, and I wish they didn't have heads.
Oh, weeping angels. Yeah.
Yeah.
But for all intents and purposes, when you look at the history of art, it has its religious roots. Because everyone wanted to hail the gods as the most important thing in society. So all of the temples, all of the mosaics, the drawings, whatever, they were very religious based because this was how you paid respect to the gods. And then you see that also in Christianity, some Judaism, Islam. There's they can depict a history, but they can't do images of God or
Right.
Muhammad. So their art is somewhat stunted in that regard. But then they also have done amazing architectural works. When you look at a lot of the temples and burial grounds in like Syria, Iraq, Iran, the Middle East areas, beautiful. And I hate to go political, but it destroyed me when I saw them blown up by ISIL explosions like that. That it killed me because that not only are you losing art, you're losing human history.
Yeah.
Thousands of years of human history.
Yeah.
You're never going to see that again, and you're never going to get it back.
Yeah.
So I'm like, wow, thanks for destroying part of the world.
Yeah.
So
one thing I've always been curious about is way back when people started creating art, they used whatever was at their disposal. They used natural elements. What is your opinion of using the natural elements around you as opposed to, say, synthetic paint that we use on canvases today?
Okay, for my part, that is a moot issue because actually, I wanted to touch on this a couple minutes ago because that was a part of a question you asked that I forgot and I never touched on it. But I'm of the mind an artist uses anything and everything to make something. As a maker, I'm also of the mind that nothing is useless. You can find a use for anything.
The blood of your enemies?
Especially the blood of your enemies. You should see my closet, man. Just buckets.
Dude. Oh, Lord.
But no, so back in early days, like the Lascaux paintings in France, all they had were like red clay. If they diluted that, you got like a nice kind of red dye. Charcoal offered black. Dirt, obviously, you got brown. Chlorophyll from grass, you got green. So the artist has to be resourceful. And I always make the argument that every artist needs to be as materialistic as possible and as unsuperficial as possible. So when you collect your materials from whatever source, whether it be garbage or dirt or whatever, if you know what you want to make, use it. If you can find a use for something, let it be part of your work of art. And if you can't find a use for something, put it in a little bin or box for collecting, and you
become a hoarder.
I would say healthy hoarding, because if
no, because it can start out as healthy hoarding, but then you're gonna end up on TV and you're gonna end up screaming at people taking things out of your house.
Touche. There's a line, and it can get dangerous. But yeah, I would argue the artist has every right to be called materialistic if they're
Mhm.
using those materials to make art, because that there are no limitations. Creativity is creativity, and if a material has the properties that you need to create the thing you want, use it. Like
Now,
when I think,
should an artist give of themselves in the sense that should they create art to keep it, or should they create art to show it to, the rest of the world?
honestly, both can happen. Like honestly, like look at Dragon Con.
Mhm,
Everyone has their own costume, their own props, that sort of thing. But look at everyone who's watching. They're sharing their creation with the world by owning it.
mhm,
By literally wearing it, displaying it on their arms, their heads,
mhm.
helmets, you know, Mjolnir or whatever, Thor's hammer. You see
Right.
a bunch of those.
Yeah.
You have artists that make things, and they will show it to the world.
Mhm,
Um, if you don't show it to the world, I mean, it only detracts from the attention it gets. Um, because you still created something. So you got
mhm,
your creativity, you got your art as your final product. And I guess as the artist, it is yours. So you can use
mhm,
it, show it to the world as you wish. Um, for my part, I would encourage artists to show it to the world because that is a part of you. That's a part of
mhm.
who you are. And just throw it out to the world and be like, hey, this is who I am. Either, take a picture of it, put it on Instagram, Facebook, blog about it, whatever. So you don't have to get rid of it in any capacity, like sell it, give it away, what have you. It can be sitting in your living room, but take that picture and then display that to show, hey, I made this. Uh,
Well, and one of the things that just popped into my head is keeping your own art, is it narcissistic? Because they say that taking pictures of yourself, there's a level of narcissism. So is keeping your own art narcissistic?
uh, I'm not going to say narcissistic. I would say there should be a healthy dose of pride going into your work. Um, Otherwise, what's the point of doing it? Uh, so, and again, so anything you make is a part of you, and you should be proud of who you are and proud of what you made. Um, Again, don't say you're better than anyone else, but just say, hey, look, I can do something.
Mhm.
And this is what I did. So judge it as you will, but
Because I mean, as far as like a graphic artist and a musician, it always has made me wonder. Musicians over time will get to the point where there are certain musicians where some of their songs that they've written have become so popular that the musician refuses to perform them. And so, and as well as with people who do any sort of art, I've, you know, there are times where the the reason the reason that they created it is still there, but their feeling toward it changes after they've created it because they've had that release by creating it, so their feeling toward it changes over time.
ah, and that's a fair assessment. Ah, and again, like even with music, it is something that you created, something that you technically own. So what you do with it, that's your choice. I would argue either the distance that an artist puts between their art and themselves, uh, I would say maybe shows an air of somewhat selflessness or maybe growth, that maybe they've changed as a person. Um, but then there's also the opposite where you have, musicians that provide amazing music. They put on, great shows. Everybody loves them. And then they become narcissistic assholes.
Yeah.
Um, so I would argue it doesn't detract from the art, but it does detract from them as people.
That whole concept of separating the art from the artist, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, not to put anyone on the spot, but I love the Rolling Stones.
Hmm.
At least I'll say I love their music.
Yeah.
Um, the group themselves, I'm like, eh. But I know Mick Jagger has a history of being very demanding.
He's I think honestly, Mick Jagger is notoriously more of a diva than Elton John.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Elton John has been I've heard that Elton John will throw shit at people if it's wrong.
Jesus.
I
Yeah,
I don't know if he could do that at his age now, but
but I'll admit, I try to separate character flaws from the character flaws of the artist from the art itself.
mhm.
Again, I'm very selective of where I want my money to go. So I may not buy a Rolling Stones album, but I will listen to the music on YouTube or Pandora or Spotify, that sort of thing.
If you and I don't know if it's going to be Weird Al or another or musician or group that you listen to, but if you had the opportunity to create album art for one of your favorite artists, what would you create?
Okay, well that's the thing. It always depends on what tools I have available. Because I'll admit, over the years, I got very used to doing my art on the computer.
Well,
Um,
no, and I mean any art can be digitized. So don't worry about what you're using to create the art. But if you had just, bare bones question, if you had the ability to create album art for one of your favorite artists or music groups, what would you create and who would it be for?
oh man, that is a good question. Because okay, so all of my again, a lot of my favorite novelty artists already do have really great cover art for their
Yeah.
albums. Um, if I were to do,
Because wasn't it the Stones that had the Andy Warhol album art with the banana? Wasn't that the Stones?
oh shoot, I actually don't know. Um, uh, bear with me. Keep talking.
Because I mean, I've been into like album art since I was a kid, and like you have the iconic albums like the Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses with the cross. You have Nirvana with the little baby swimming toward the dollar that's on the fish hook, and then there's that one album where it's a banana and you can actually unzip it, like it physically unzip it.
Oh, interesting. Uh,
And I think it's a Warhol. At least the art is. I don't know what the band is that has that.
the Velvet Underground. Does that sound familiar?
Maybe.
Um, I know at the very least, I know Andy Warhol did do a banana art for the Velvet Underground. He may have
Okay.
done other album
So
covers.
yeah, it was probably them. I don't know why I associate it with the Stones, but probably because I didn't really listen to the Velvet Underground.
Man,
But yeah, it's just I
oh
I think that
god,
and because of my love for music, I think that's where I've seen the majority of the art that I've been exposed to is album art and the art on the actual CD or the on the actual record?
I'll admit, I've been very fond of Weird Al's CD art because he
Oh
utilizes
yeah,
the roundness of the CD, and he
yeah,
does either something with his face or he like curls himself into like a ball shaped space, and then that's put on the CD
yeah,
or something like that.
yeah,
So they've done very cool, I get photography,
yeah.
um, art covers. Uh, so I would say I'd love to do an art cover for maybe Weird Al or the Arrogant Worms or They Might Be Giants. Oh, actually, They Might Be Giants might be a fun one because
Yeah.
their music is just all over the place.
Hmm.
Like it's like music from a dream. Like the lyrics are really weird.
Could you hypothetically do you think that you would have the ability to create album art for a concept album? Would you have to listen to the album first, or could you just do it based on what the artist or group is asking you to do?
I personally would like to listen to the music first. If I had guidance from the artists themselves, then I'd be open to that. But I feel like
Yeah,
I could get a more nuanced, probably more detailed work done if I listen to the music.
because I know,
So,
at least for me, I know that I'll listen to all types of music, but I know that there's just some music that I don't connect with. So if I was tasked with, creating art or like album art for an album, like a concept album, I don't know if I would be able to accurately create the artwork if I didn't connect with the full concept of the album.
mm, because even like music would, it'll inspire imagery in your
Yeah,
mind as you listen to
yeah,
it. So, um, as an artist, like that'd be crucial to my design choice.
hmm,
So, so yeah, I would say I would listen to the music,
yeah,
um, but while also taking input from uh, the group members themselves. If they have a vision in mind, I wouldn't want to deviate too far from that, but I'd like to maybe add a few things just to make it
yeah,
a little bit more reflective of the album itself.
yeah.
So,
Just for this last part of this part of the podcast, I want to go deeper into, you know, us going to conventions, whether it be ones that we've been to individually or, our experience at Dragon Con, from a visual and artistic standpoint, what we've seen at conventions, what we've enjoyed seeing, and kind of what w- like the things that we see on TV that we hope to see at conventions.
ah,
Because I know that, um, as far as size, I know that for both of us, Dragon Con last year was our first largest convention.
yeah.
We had never been to a convention. Neither of us had been to a convention that big before. But I think that for me at least, and maybe it was just because there was so many people there. I think it was so much sensory overload, seeing so many different things that I can only remember things through pictures. Um,
God.
so in an area like that where you have that much creativity in one space, how do you know, task your brain with being able to individually identify so many different things? And
Ah,
what have you liked from Dragon Con last year or other conventions that you've been to?
boy, that's a funny question. So
Well, I'm a funny guy.
that is true. Um, I I guess for my part, I almost had to do like a subconscious categorization of
Yeah.
things. Like I had to filter out costumes and stuff that I had no idea what it was. So I'm
Mhm,
like, okay, so that's out of my attention span.
mhm,
And then I had to be able to identify things that I recognized.
Yeah.
And then from there, I stepped it up to be like, I guess, being drawn to things that I love. Like
Hmm.
when I saw, the Doctors, or like Groucho Marx, or Captain Hook, or Optimus Prime, or
That freaking Captain Hook still blows my mind. Like it's something like that where when you can't tell whether it's a guy or a girl in it, that's when you know that they've done a great job on that costume.
yeah. Uh, but yeah, it's you do have to pick and choose what you uh want to pay attention to, because otherwise it would be sensory overload.
Yeah.
Like honestly, when I saw the R2D2s and the BB-8s, that was my, like, no question. I was 100% drawn to them.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, I gotta see this.
I think that's the difference between costuming and prop building, because there was no people in those. That was just automated,
That was, yeah,
like
robotics,
robotically automated.
and again,
And it was something that I mean, I've seen like lower scale things done, but that was really high tech for,
life size.
yeah,
Yeah. But again, that mix of artistry and engineering, like, they go together very well.
yeah.
And that's another reason why I love steampunk, because
Mhm.
that's like a nice clash between the art and engineering, and you get really cool costuming, really cool props, like that work. You get form and function with a nice Victorian aesthetic. So
Yeah.
and actually, I'm to this Dragon Con, I'm thinking of bringing a steampunk costume. So hopefully I can fit it all in the trunk. But yeah, I really enjoyed seeing what people make at Dragon Con. I I don't know what else I'd like to see. I just take it for what it is, and just enjoy myself,
Mhm.
because a lot of stuff I may have forgotten. Like if I see I don't know, like an Uncle Scrooge or something at Dragon Con, I'm gonna be like, oh my god, I totally forgot. Well, I guess now I remembered, but otherwise,
Yeah.
I totally forgot about Uncle Scrooge, or
Yeah.
what a great cosplay, or that sort of thing. Um, and I know there's this new movement of what's it called, like bounding. It's where you almost take like a modern fashion
Mhm.
within the aesthetic of a character. So, hypothetically, like if you were to do Aladdin, say,
Mhm.
you might do like a purple T-shirt with like beige cargo pants, or something with a brown belt or something, and a red hoodie or cap or something.
You actually make a good point, because last year when we were there was this girl that walked past me, and she was wearing purple, almost yoga pants, and she was wearing a yellow t-shirt, and she had yellow and purple ear type things. And even though up until then, I've never seen this character outside of Disney, like outside of Disney World, like the park, I instantly recognized what she was supposed to be. And it was a character that they created for a specific attraction in Disney in the 90s, um, called Figment of Your Imagination. And it was a purple dragon named Figment.
Oh,
And I remember getting a photo with her. And it shocked me, because like I haven't been to Disney since I was 8 years old. So, the fact that she was just doing an interpretation of the character and not a full on, all out cosplay of the costume, I was amazed that I was able to recognize it. But I think she did enough where it triggered that memory in my brain. And the one along the lines of what we do with the podcast, finding things that create conversation. I think that Comic-Con, whether it be Dragon Con or any other variation, I think that the creativity that you see there, it sparks it, adds the ability for people to engage in conversation. It's an icebreaker for people to engage in conversation and really figure out, how they can relate to each other.
Art does connect people. I I find that effect fascinating, especially
Mhm,
in at conventions, because people are essentially wearing their art. So you kind of it becomes a very social event, or
yeah,
even more so. It's just leaps and bounds ahead of like like an art museum. Like you're seeing again amazing piece of art on a wall, but there's not really that engagement
mhm,
that you get at an art museum. Whereas at a convention, people are everywhere
mhm,
and you can't help it, especially when they're wearing the art itself.
mhm.
And you want to know how they made it, where they got their ideas, their materials, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
And to get a very good icebreaker.
Yeah.
Um, I've been enjoying myself at these conventions.
Yeah. Are there things that you have watched or seen since the last convention that you hope to maybe see in a couple of days?
Uh, well, okay. I mean, I can't say I have like any outright hopes,
Mhm.
but I kind of do want to see a fat Thor.
You know, like along around a lot of the message boards that I frequent, there have been so many things that have been said about Comic-Con and Fat Thor. And, back to what we were talking about before, as far as shaming people for the things that they do, I do think that if you are a bigger person, that might be something like an aesthetic that you could, do and not get judged for. You shouldn't get judged for it anyway, but I think that kind of maybe put the idea in the heads of somebody who's bigger that they can do that and not feel scrutinized if they themselves are a bigger person.
God, and that's that was an interesting point that I wanted to make along this conversation. I'm sorry we got it to it so late,
No.
but that's the thing. Like cosplay is for everyone, and art is for everyone.
Hmm.
Like no one should care uh, how you look in a costume, or what your body type is as an
Hmm.
artist, because it's for everyone. Everyone should be having a good time,
Hmm.
and it's a matter of self-expression.
Right.
And if your body type is your body type,
Right.
so I mean, just run with it. Um, but the sad thing is that we do still live in a very superficial society. And I guess alluding to a previous topic we were discussing, killing creativity. When you shame someone enough, bring them down, just tear pieces out of them.
Chip
Metaphorically speaking,
chip away at them.
yeah. It it can break someone over time, and that can be very discouraging, and that can kill creativity.
Hmm.
It's art is very personal, and I, I that should be embraced. It
Hmm.
shouldn't be attacked,
Hmm.
and that's something I don't like seeing at
Right.
conventions. For the most part, I don't see it at conventions.
Yeah, and it's rare that, I mean, I hear about stories like on online message boards of things happening, but I myself, I don't believe I've ever experienced or I've seen it in front of me when I'm at a convention. I don't think I've
Yeah.
ever, witnessed anything like that.
Um, and neither have I. For the most part, the cons that I've been to, Everyone is really supportive, inclusive. It's incredible, and it's very encouraging and invigorating at the same time. So I like to think the con itself is usually a nice safe area. It's when people post their costumes online where you get these you know
Jackasses.
yes, these trolls and that sort of thing.
Well,
You have
and I mean that people feel comfortable being able to criticize somebody from behind a keyboard.
it's a nice
That's why they came up with the whole term of keyboard warrior.
yeah.
So people feel comfortable. They wouldn't. That's why I love going to conventions because if you're dressed as Tinkerbell, but your personal characteristic is that you're kind of a bitch and you're criticizing somebody who is maybe dressed like Shrek, and that person who is dressed like Shrek is maybe a foot taller than you. If you're criticizing them in person, it's likely
Mm.
that they could kick your ass.
And yeah, that is true. So, but yeah, for the most part, I really enjoyed myself last year.
Mhm,
Um, and I feel like the people there are just welcoming and embracing of the whole cosplay maker culture, that sort of thing. And each of them are artists in their own right, and I think they know that. So everyone is more apt to be like, "Oh my god, this is amazing! Well done! How did you do this?" Strike up a good positive conversation. And very rarely, I would think you'd ever see anyone chastising or berating someone for
yeah.
their costume.
Like you said, 99% of it happens online because of that safe barrier between the 2 people.
Yeah, you got this screen right in front of you. So
But one of the things that I wanted to touch on, because I know that it was a huge thrill for you, um, are you more inclined to continue creating when one of your creations is recognized?
mm,
Because I know that you got such a kick out of somebody or people recognizing your cosplay last year from Fantastic Beasts, or I think that's what it was from, right?
yeah, and again, I don't have the wherewithal or resources to do like a full-fledged Newt Scamander with like the blue jacket or overcoat,
Mhm,
the scarf and everything. So I did have kind of a beigeish yellowish vest, white
mhm.
shirt, brown pants, and a wand. Um, Miraculously, people recognize me because I think at the time I had my summer haircut, so
Uh-huh.
my hair was short. I wasn't very well prepared for Dragon Con last year, but I wasn't impressed.
I think it was a spur of the moment kinda thing, even though it was a few months out, I think it was for us, it was just a spur of the moment thing because we saw who was gonna be there as far as guests.
Yeah,
And I think that was the deciding factor of, "Hey, let's kind of do this on a whim." But I
it,
think now, that we enjoyed it and we're going back, we've had more of an opportunity to kind of get our bearings and know what to expect.
yeah. But to add, hardship to it all is that you're in Atlanta, Georgia, at the end of August.
Hot Lana, and
Yeah.
we found out last year why they call it Hot Lana, because if you don't leave Dragon Con having lost 25 pounds, you're not doing it right.
Because part of my reason for
And I will go so far as to say you don't have 25 pounds to lose.
I know I'd die. So, but that's another thing. I have to choose my costumes very carefully because I don't want to overheat.
Right.
So I'm keeping a lot of my, now that I do have an overcoat, I'm keeping it here.
Mhm.
Any capes or cloaks or armor, that sort of thing. I'm like, I'm not gonna wear that in Atlanta.
And
So,
I think that's the benefit of the people that actually stay in the hotels. Like the ones that
Yes.
actually rent rooms in the hotels, they don't have to necessarily go outside because they have the caterpillar between the hotels that they can walk between the hotels through the bridges.
Yeah.
So I think that is the benefit. Eventually, once we're more seasoned, I think we'll end up probably getting a hotel room at one of the hotels so that maybe we can do a little bit more extravagant cosplays where we know that we're not going to die from heat exhaustion.
Yeah. And also on top of that, there are a lot of people there, and I don't want my costume to be so cumbersome that I'm bumping into people.
Well, yeah, but
That's
the
another
thing
thing.
is, I think that's one of the things that noticed last year was I don't think I, knowing how many people potentially could be there, I think the people that actually attend know that the space to move around is probably going to be limited to some degree, so they probably don't plan, the gigantic, video game monster cosplay or the machines in video games. They don't plan those because they know that it's not economical to be able to get around in
Mm.
those areas.
Yeah, and I
I think knowing your environment helps you cosplay and create the best.
yeah, which is why I try to keep it as light as possible.
Yeah.
So I have a nice, yeah, I mean, luckily, Star Trek is pretty minimal
Yeah.
regarding costuming. So I have a science uh, t-shirt and just wear like black cargo pants or something, and you kind of look the part already.
Well,
So
and if you remember last year, I got you that little
yeah,
journal book.
captain's log.
Do you still have that with you?
Yeah, I do.
Because I was
Uh,
gonna say
I'm gonna keep that in my
you could
back pocket.
yeah, you could either put it in your back pocket or put it in a belt loop so that people can see it as you're walking around.
Yeah. So
So yeah, if you're doing because I know we had that discussion of whether you were Star Trek or Star Wars, and you're more Star Wars than Star Trek.
I'll admit, yeah. So
Um, but me being more Star Trek, I saw that, and for some reason, it just made me think of you, and I was like, you know what, I got to get that for him because he might actually get some use out of it,
yeah.
even though it was Star Trek and not Star Wars.
Oh my god. But yeah, it was it's an I think I might keep it as like a Dragon Con journal
Yeah.
because it's uh Dragon Con is what, like 5 days,
Hmm.
and the book I could probably it's small enough to keep in your back pocket, so I can't write too much, but
Yeah, I
I
was
could
gonna say it's small
do
enough to where you could probably fill it up within 3 sentences.
but it would make a good Dragon Con journal,
Yeah.
and this time around I hope to make a lot fewer mistakes, so it might
Well,
be worth
and
actually
also
documenting.
I think the way to make a Dragon Con journal is to get photo and video, and I think we're going to be a lot more equipped to do that this coming year
Yep.
because I had my equipment last year, but really didn't get anything that I could have used for a video.
Yeah.
But I think that we're going to be more prepared, and you got to figure having to leave our equipment an hour away, the drive time with all of that equipment was a thing too. So I
Yeah,
think better planning is going to be better for us this year.
exactly. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it this year, and hopefully gonna do it right. So,
Yeah. Um, do you hope to come away from Dragon Con having made any connections? Like, because I know um, what we're doing right now with the comic book and the movie, I really want to focus on developing connections with creative people and people that are maybe more seasoned in those areas to
uh,
get to bounce ideas off of them. Um, do you have kind of a sense of who you want to talk to in those creative realms to get point or to get like tips from?
God, it's weird because a lot of my recent artistic endeavors have been, um, but you started the movie and the comic book with me just a few months ago. But prior to that, I was doing leatherworking, woodworking, a little bit of electronics for a lot of like steampunk.
So when
And
we get into like casting the movie, you could actually be part of the costuming as well.
yeah, because I would love to see someone who dabbles in like electronics or mechanical engineering to make like working uh, costume pieces.
Mhm.
That that is just something that appeals to me, and I have just some experience in that, but I don't have the full wherewithal to do like a clockwork steampunk costume or like
Mhm.
a really like a working functional cyberpunk costume with like lights and LEDs and glowing things. I just think that'd be cool. Uh, and I know Dragon Con, like you're most definitely going to find somebody who knows something about these details of costuming because there's what 80,000 plus people there, and plus there might be panels that
Yeah.
will.
I think the tracks are going to be very beneficial to us this year.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
as a final note, before we tell people about in detail what with the stuff that we're doing creatively, I want to ask one more question. Do you do you see yourself being somebody who is a jack of all trades, a master of none, or vice versa? Do you think it's more important to be a jack of all trades?
uh, for my part, yes, I do. But I know purely in economical terms, you know, specialties make money.
Mhm.
So if you're a master at something, then you're going to make the big bucks.
Well,
Um,
you also, I mean, look at what we're doing with a podcast on YouTube. You have to see how much saturation there is in that market. If it's oversaturated, you may not make as much money as you'd hope.
Touche. Um, but for my part, I, as far as like evolutionary biological terms,
Hmm.
being a jack of all trades just it grants you adaptability.
Hmm.
So you're way more versatile to play, one role. Oh crap! There's something happening. Now I got to play another role in something.
Hmm.
Um, and uh, so I really admire that.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I'm very self-reliant.
Yeah.
So if I can find a way to do something myself, if there's like plumbing, if I have a problem with that, I'm going to go on YouTube, find out how to do it myself, and then do my best to master it. I can't say I'm a master of it, but I fixed the problem myself, and now I know how to do it. Uh, and the same goes for artists. I started off, you know, uh, pencil, paper, uh, a little bit of theater, but now I do, woodworking, leatherworking, costuming. I build things. So I'm a bit more diversified creatively, and that just boosts my creativity because now I
Hmm.
have multiple platforms to jump off of.
Yeah.
um, as a human being. And again, I guess with the plumbing example, I uh, I know how to do stuff,
Yeah.
so it's empowering in that regard. I don't have to rely on someone else to save me. I can do it myself.
Hmm.
And I
So basically, having at least a basic understanding of a lot of things is probably better than having an advanced understanding of one thing.
Yeah, because if you have the seed of knowledge in any field, then you have the potential to grow more.
Yeah.
Whereas if you don't have that seed, then you have to rely on someone else.
Yeah.
But I mean, look at this podcast. I mean, look at the varied conversations we've had.
Hmm.
There's been some overlap, but every idea just opens a doorway to other ideas. So that versatility as well.
Yeah.
So for my part, versatility is key to creativity. But again, if you become a master of something, like, I'm not going to hold that against you. I'm going to
Right.
honor and just be in awe that you put that much time and dedication into something to master anything, whether you're a freaking ophthalmologist or a sculptor.
Yeah.
So
So I really think that this was very productive. I think we got a lot out there,
I
and
hope
I
so.
think we've explored in great detail, the varying aspects of creativity and the importance of it and the importance of how to, you know, interact with potential clients and, not alienating yourself, but how you know, present your art to other people and, you know, having a willingness to show your art to people, but not to let them take advantage of you.
Definitely. And just for our audience, um, if you're confused, leave comments down below.
Yeah. We always encourage, questions, topics for future streams. But I think in closing, I think we talked about this in the last podcast. Um, we're both doing uh, artistic projects right now, and one of them is a comic book that we're developing that we hope to have um, published and printed by January 1st. The other one is a movie script that we're working on that we hope to have finished by next summer, and we'll start casting for it. Um, as far as those projects and the podcast, if you enjoy what you're seeing and what we're talking about, um, there is a link in the description for our PayPal if you would be willing to, donate to help us, continue doing this, and also to further our other artistic endeavors. And if you look in the description, we also have a merch store through Spreadshirt now. That would greatly help us as well. So if you like this, you know, hit the like button, leave us a comment down below, share this stream, hit the subscribe button, and if you have anything that you want us to talk about, feel free to reach out to us. The email's right in the description. So we will see everybody not next Wednesday because we will be in Atlanta, but the following Wednesday. Um, I believe we come home is it on a Monday or a Tuesday? I believe we're headed back. I
We're
don't.
headed back Tuesday. So you'll be home on Tuesday. I'll be home on Wednesday.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we might take 2 Wednesdays off. I'm not sure, depending on how tired Lanky is by the time he gets back home, because he's got a longer drive. But we'll keep everybody posted. But let us know, what you think in the, comments down below, and follow us on social media, and we'll keep you posted when we are going live again. So we will see everybody later. Bye.
All right.